at some point.
Okay, and with those words we begin the first ever CAS Chat Live. So hopefully there are folks watching us. It's lovely if you are. Welcome. There are a number of us who are virtually present rather than physically present in the room. By way of introduction, we've got our fancy new CAS TV YouTube channel where we've been putting some interviews with interesting scientists, educators and teachers and this sort of thing. And the most recent of those was a fabulous interview with Carrie Anne Philbin looking at some of the issues around gender and computing. And Carrie Anne has very, very kindly agreed to spend an hour with us this evening talking about these things in a bit more detail with a little bit more interaction than just here is a YouTube video all around these things. Can we just go through the people who are present in the Hangout now as by way of introduction? Hi, I'm Miles Berry. I work at the University of Roehampton. I'm part of CAS's board and have been looking after at least some elements of this CAS TV project this year.
Who's going to go next?
Sue.
Oh, my name is Sue Gray. I'm a teacher of computing and IT at a Norfolk Rural High School, or Academy as we are now, and all the interesting challenges that brings.
Hi, my name's John. I'm not sure if it's picking me up.
I can hear you, John. Carry on.
My name's John. I'm a IT director and teaching of computer science at Queen Margaret's School, an independent girls' school in Yorkshire.
Billy?
Let me try this on. Okay, you can see me now. So my name is Billy Warren and I work at the University of Roehampton. My research is mainly into science education, but recently I've moved on to computer science education, so I'm quite intrigued to see how we can bring those two together a bit more.
And finally, Carrie Anne.
Well, hello. So I'm Carrie Anne. I work for the Raspberry Pi Foundation. I used to be a teacher. I sit on the CAS board, and I'm also chair of #Include, which is the diversity and inclusion working group of the CAS group.
Thank you ever so much. That's great. So, Carrie Anne, do you want to kick us off? What are the key issues around gender and computing from your perspective?
Yeah, so it feels like this is a good opportunity to kind of start this conversation by saying that gender issue within STEM subjects and STEM education is not something that we are going to solve in the next 10, 25, 50 years, because there are much wider cultural issues surrounding why there aren't that many girls or women in technology and science and engineering and so on. So I think if there is any teacher who's watching this who has identified that perhaps they don't have a huge uptake of girls within their subject, or are seeing that they aren't quite as switched on as they want them to be, I think they should, really give themselves a pat on the back. That the fact that they're even noticing this and they want to do something about it should be applauded, because this is not an easy road, and it doesn't. Any of the things that we suggest are not going to give you instant results. I don't think there is one particular methodology that's going to work. So I think we should start by saying that, and just knowing that we are not going to solve this straight away is probably a good place to start.
Okay. There is an issue, though. There is underrepresentation of girls when it comes to computing in school.
Right, there is, and we can see this. There's lots of data around this, lots of studies. Nesta did one a few years ago about women in computer science, which also drew on what was happening in schools. We know from looking at the qualifications, GCSE and A-levels, how many girls are taking the subject. There's lots of news reports even lately about something like 400 girls took A-level computing last year. So we know this is a problem. But like I say, this is a wider cultural problem, and I don't think that it's unique, first of all, to us in England or to us computer science subject. It's definitely a global phenomenon, and there's something around girls taking up the subject right now, but there's also issues around women who are currently in technology and what's happening with them. So we have this idea of a leaky pipeline, which is when girls come to us in age 11 in year 7, they're all super excited about the subject, they love it, they take part, they're so engaging and creative and innovative, and then by sort of year 9, suddenly they're kind of not so interested anymore, and then GCSE level, they start dropping out, and then by the time you get to A level, they've mostly gone, and if they only get to university, they're probably the only girl or woman in the room by that point. So there's kind of this leaky pipeline. They do make it into technology, and they do make it into industry, and the problems don't end, sadly, and there is this leaky bucket. So, you know, they're in technology for a while and then they leave. So it's bigger than just our subject.
Okay.
That's the bad news.
There's a couple of things I want to come up there. Firstly, at the age of 11, they're all really keen, really enthusiastic. Is that the case? At primary school, have we solved the problem? Is that we shouldn't be worried about gender issues and computing in primary school because girls and boys are both loving the subject?
Right. Well, so I'm a secondary teacher. So for me, I always look at it from a year 7. That was my experience. That 11-year-olds were super excited about it. I mean, I'd be interested from anyone else on this panel if they think of any experience of primary school.
Jane, what do you think?
Oh, I'm just unmuting myself. Can you hear me now?
I can.
Yeah, okay. I think it's really variable, and there are some schools where girls are, as you said, Karen, I completely agree, they're completely fired up, but there are other schools where they start to feel overshadowed, particularly in years 5 and 6. So there's something odd that happens in some schools where the girls, I don't know if it's collective, I don't know if it's something about, like, I completely agree, it's a social, collective odd thing that happened. So I think, Miles, my answer is it's really variable from school to school, and I wish I could find what it is, the kind of magic bullet. Whether it's about the teachers themselves, I don't know, but I'd be interested to hear what other people think.
Other views on this?
We certainly have a really broad spectrum of skill levels coming into secondary, and I think that can really impact the sort of engagement with the lessons as well. Teaching in an all-girls school, the kind of gender question and gender divide is gone for us, but still there's that skills divide and there's that engagement, and I find those who come in to secondary school with a lower skill level often are a little bit more reticent to kind of try things out and get involved. I think maybe that's partly to do with it as well.
Okay, but obviously working in a girls' school, you don't see that as something which is a gender issue. Do you have any idea of where that sort of skill divide is coming from?
I mean, tricky for us in the independent sector because we don't really have defined feeder primaries. It's kind of tricky to build a relationship with where your students may be coming from. So it's also really hard for us as teachers to know what they're covering in their prep schools before they come to us. So I just think it's maybe that real breadth of experience that they're getting, that real difference in experience is leading to that sort of skill divide that we've seen.
Sue, what's your perspective on this?
Over the last year and a half, I've been doing a code club at a local primary school, and that's been really interesting and enlightening. I've found that I've had more girls than boys. I've had more girls stay longer than boys. Currently, because the after-school activities have moved to more sporting, all the boys have gone, and I've now got just the girls. I've got 6 girls, and they're loving it. I've got one girl who is year 6 and will come up next year to high school, and I know that her interest is huge. She's really talented. She loves doing what we're doing, and because we're doing Code Club, we're kind of doing the curriculum again. So she's super excited about, oh yes, web pages, can I show the younger ones, and all that kind of thing. And I know she will carry it into year 7. So I'm kind of waiting till we get to the tail end of year 8, maybe year 9, when something, in my experience, will switch and she will say, nah, I'm not interested anymore. I'm hoping that won't happen, but I see it, as Carrie Anne says, they come in year 7 and they're super excited, and then something happens. I don't know what it is. There's something in the water at secondary school.
Billy, does this ring true with your research around STEM education more generally?
Well, I think the problems which we're seeing here is actually very similar to what we see in science. And a lot of the science research also shows that young people in primary schools are quite fascinated by science. But as soon as they reach year 7, year 8, the first year, they're happy because they're doing Bunsen burners, they're doing experiments. And then from year 8 onwards, they're doing a lot of writing up, a lot of reading. And that's, again, it filters through in the sense that they start losing interest. I think the issue of computer science, it's probably marked a similar roadmap. But I suspect the fact that young people are growing up to get a bit older, 11, 12, 13, they're developing a stronger sense of identity of who they want to be. And of course, as we know, computer science has a very masculine culture, at least beyond the school system, which makes it less desirable for a lot of young people, especially girls, to really see themselves being part of that culture. So I think a bigger effort requires just beyond schools to really break down that gender stereotype. That's my feeling.
I mean, is there something in this where, right now we're looking at the students and we're saying, what's wrong with you students? Why aren't you as excited about these subjects as we are? Is there something actually perhaps we should be looking at ourselves, and perhaps rather than looking at the biases of children and students, we should be looking at perhaps our own behaviours as educators and our own biases and our own unconscious biases that could be turning girls off of STEM subjects?
I definitely agree. I definitely agree. I'm sure that Carrie Anne will back me up on this, that teachers very often, women teachers, are the last ones to use the laptop. I don't know anything about computers, and they very often are not just giving a really positive role model. So consequently, students pick up on that. And just recently, I've done the barefoot training. So I'm hoping to spread the love in primary schools, and maybe get the primary teachers being more enthused about it, because I think they think that what we do is difficult, and it isn't. So I think we need to get them early and carry it on.
I'd really like to second what Sue says. I think when I see it from reception onwards, where the confidence of so many, and it is a predominantly female environment that we have in primary, but it's as bizarre as soon as a male teacher appears or a technician, they're male, and it's like we'll just wait for the male technician to arrive. And it's a similar thing that I remember happening with maths a couple of years ago, where we were told we just should not say we didn't know what we were doing, and it was kind of like a little bit of a, oh my goodness, we've all got to try and be confident with maths. And some people found that really very, very difficult. But I saw a real sea change within my community, where teachers went, oh, all right then, I'm just going to say that I love maths, even if I don't. And I think that had a really positive impact, but I don't know if there's been research done to say that that's true. But I completely agree with Sue, and I completely agree with Carrie Anne, and Phil Bagg talks about this, the whole thing of the learned helplessness. I was looking at a beautiful website today for a coding club, and the pictures were of males standing above the little girls who are sitting there all looking passively up at these male students who were teaching them just what they needed to know about coding. And it was this whole thing, and I thought, but these were young students who were running a really gorgeous coding coding club, but they'd fallen into exactly the same trap of having these very passive young girls and these kind of saviours. But I completely agree, Karen, and I don't know what we do about it.
I think
there's an interesting question put onto the Google form for signing up for this about one of the differences between primary and secondary is the gender balance, particularly I think of those who are teaching computing, that if in the primary model computing is being taught by class teachers in primary schools, that is typically women who are teaching computing. And the point about the sort of modelling helplessness notwithstanding, I wonder if that's one of the factors which actually means that girls do see computing as something which they're interested in, enthusiastic about, like doing at primary school. Is there research, Billy, around the gender of a teacher affecting pupils' perceptions of a subject? Or not? Billy, can you hear me?
Oh, sorry, you're asking me. Okay. Yes.
As somebody with a degree of expertise in the area, does gender of teacher make a difference to choices or attitudes towards STEM subjects?
I think it can, but whether or not it's a positive or a negative is up for debate, because you might argue that having a female computing teacher, for example, then girls will relate it to more. But that's not necessarily the case sometimes, because I think it's just a perception that people have that just because it's the same gender, it means that people associate more with. But I'm not 100% sure, to be honest. I'll be interested to see what others think.
Okay, we're seeing sage nods from Carrie Anne and the...
Yeah.
God.
So I don't think it's necessarily to do with the gender. I mean, I think there is something around teachers generally, whatever gender that teacher is, about the negative or the unconscious biases that they show in the classroom. There is research in the States that demonstrates that teachers will more often than not take questions from boys at the end of a lesson more than they'll take questions from girls. And they don't even realise they're doing that. And teachers, there was a survey done, and teachers rate boys' ability in STEM much higher than girls' ability in STEM. And again, these are just kind of unconscious things that we're doing without realizing we're doing it. And lots of male teachers, as well as female teachers, will say things like, you know, I'm not very good at maths, or I'm not very good at physics, or, you know, I'm really into gadgets. That's another kind of, if you flip it the other way, I'm really into gadgets and Xbox and gaming and so on. Without realizing that that may be having some kind of effect on the class that they have.
So you say these are unconscious biases. What can we do to prevent these things or to diminish the effect of these?
Right, so it's about making the unconscious conscious.
Right.
Which, you know, when you say it like that, it sounds really obvious, but it's a really tough thing to do. And right now, organizations like Google, one of the things they're doing is, this is a big part of their internal training program. They're looking at how they make those unconscious biases conscious for the whole team, not just in their hiring policy, but also, you know, how they develop people within the roles within their organization. And they're starting to publish their research and what they're doing and what's working for them and not working for them. So I think just, you know, filming yourself in a lesson, which is a really scary thing to do. I've done it when I was teaching. It's like the worst thing you can do. Well, it's the worst thing and the best thing, right? Because you learn what you're doing. You can see some of the tics that you have, like if you say and yeah quite a lot. So you kind of have to get over that first of all.
I find myself, when I watch myself, waving my hands a great
Right, yeah. Do this a lot. So that's quite scary, but you will also pick up some of the things that you're doing without realizing you're doing it. One thing I noticed, that I was focusing a lot of what I was saying to one side of the classroom and not the other. And when I looked at the seating plan of that classroom, I realized there was quite a few boys in that sector. So without realizing, I knew I was delivering quite a lot of what I was saying to them and not really connecting with the other students. So that's one way of making the kind of unconscious conscious.
Do others have advice on this, of how we can eliminate these unconscious biases?
I think I would second that point in the sense that to really deconstruct stereotype, I think we just have to acknowledge and recognize that these stereotypes exist, and then to challenge that heads on. So rather than assuming that everyone is equal, we have to acknowledge that actually in the tech world, for example, men are more likely, but that doesn't mean you can't do it. So it's almost like putting the laundry out in a sense that we just have to tackle it head on, and that's one way to what Carrie was saying about recognizing our subconsciousness about various biases that we may have in relation to gender or various other social variables that we might have.
As teachers, our seating plan, Carrie Anne will obviously know about this as well, seating plans are desperately important, and I've strictly enforced a completely alphabetical seating plan this year, which has worked slightly better, but has led to one or two interesting combinations I wouldn't necessarily have volunteered for, but in an attempt really to stop people, girls sitting with their friends and boys sitting with their friends, which it doesn't always work very well for them, in a chemistry sort of way, and that's worked quite nicely in that girls and boys have been forced to work together because you have to work with the person next to you, but also it means that because they're not congregating, as Carrie Anne said, in one sort of corner of the room, as I look around the room, and my room's a sort of weird a horseshoe with a bit in the middle, I cast my eye across the room and I see a mixture of boys and girls. I don't just see a group of girls and a group of boys, whereas when they were allowed to choose, it really was like that. I mean, literally, there was a line down the middle of the room, or one side was pink and one side was blue. So mixing them up gives them the opportunity to work together, and also sometimes that way then the girls, when they have to work with boys, maybe they're the ones who come up with the bright idea. Maybe when they're stuck on, when they're in that stuckness thing, it's the girl who says, well, maybe you should try that, and that's also good. But yeah, I mean, if I'll tell you about the programming challenge that I do in a bit. Maybe somebody's got something else they want to say first.
I want to hear more about this. But I mean, one of the things which I think school teaches you is how to get on well with other people. We throw children to people who happen to share a similar birth date and postcode and expect them to be able to learn together. And I think that having to work with a particular person rather than getting to choose who you work with is really interesting. I'm curious how it went down with your students, though, Sue.
Yes, indeed. It's getting better. They're not always chuffed at sitting next to a boy or working with a boy, or vice versa. But we'll get over it.
Okay.
Certainly in primary, they don't have any choice.
Sorry,
they will have to. In primary, they won't have any choice. We will put them boy girl with different talk partners, in all sorts of different combinations. But obviously they're probably more malleable and there's less hormonal, and it's bizarre what happens in year 5. There's something, it all just changed. There's all things going on with friendship groups and all those kind of things. But I wondered as well, I don't know if this is kind of changing the subject a little bit, but about role models, that whether, there's lots, we talk about female role models, but sometimes when I look at the female role models that we have, they're quite historical, and whether they're within the true aspirations of current young women, I'm not sure. And even though we kind of mentioned
8-year-olds don't get excited about Ada Lovelace and Grace Hopper or something.
I'm not sure they do. They might like the uniform or whatever, or the crinoline, but and I don't know what we do about that, because even more kind of up to date people, they're not the rock stars, they're not the kind of the YouTube stars or the, I don't know. I kind of don't know.
This is such a good point, and I was talking to someone about this only the other day, that we say that role models are really important to not just bring girls into these subjects, but also other groups of people, and yet when we look at all the role models we're trying to bring in, I saw this presentation by someone who was saying that his goal was to get Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and will.i.am and all these big names into schools to really inspire the children. And, you know, what I felt was, well, actually, those people don't represent the communities in which they want those people to go into. And that's a problem. And actually, there's something in just trying to have role models who are people within the community. So it could be just having digital leaders. So year 6 girls who, other girls who are in year 4 and 5 can see are digital leaders, and they have this badge and they're doing technical things and they're leading in that way. And I used that same structure in secondary school, where I had A-level and GCSE students act as teaching assistants in my year 7, 8 and 9 classes, because then it was more relevant to them, because they could actually see people who were like them, who were perhaps a few years ahead of them, within the same community representing them. And that goes not just for girls, but also children from, you know, socioeconomic backgrounds as well. Some of the worst role models that we show, white working class boys, are, you know, people who have been privately educated, and you know, we celebrate those people. So there is definitely something in this role models thing that we need to be careful of. Role models are important, but let's make sure we're picking the right role models.
I read a research paper a while ago about some American thing where they'd basically just chosen cheerleaders, and they said it worked. So they kind of chosen some of who were the aspirational change agents.
This is literally cheerleaders, Jane.
Pardon?
Literally cheerleaders.
Yeah, no, they had chosen their cheerleaders. So they had found the most popular girls and gone, right, you lot, you come do some coding. And they had photographs, they had like big posters everywhere of cheerleaders doing kind of tech. And they'd kind of done lots of various, I don't know what it was, but surveys and things. And they said, well, it looks like it might make a difference. But I must find the paper again. But it sounded like something, well, okay. Maybe. I don't know, but I think it's just what Carrie Anne said. It's about who is relevant and who they aspire to be like, rather than who we might think they might be like to be like. I don't know.
The celebrity, the rock star thing, as you know, seems almost as distant as Ada Lovelace or Grace Hopper from most school children's lives. And the thing which we had in the interview of Carrie Anne talking about her sixth form was going in and helping with year 7, year 8 lessons is such a powerful idea. And I love the idea of helping there with primary to secondary transition. And, you know, as you say, the digital leaders, of making sure that that is a gender neutral, gender inclusive type of badge that one awards. And I think there's potential there around involvement with the local computing industry, the local computer community, and Raspberry Jams and Code Club particularly, and the notion of the volunteers who are helping out in primary school. Other people's experience of role models and addressing stereotyping.
Yeah, before you move on to that, I'm glad you mentioned Code Club and the volunteers, because Code Club have a fantastic track record of female engagement. Like 40% of participants at Code Clubs are girls. I mean, that's incredible. So obviously they're doing something right.
Do we have statistics on Code Club volunteers and how that breaks down gender-wise?
We probably do. I don't know them right now, but I should definitely look into that.
In front of you on your screen. Okay, well, we'll do that. Other people's views?
I think it's interesting what Jane was saying, and sort of going back to the aspiration, slightly off of the gender issue perhaps, but I think that there are a huge amount of really sort of amazing female role models that we can pull out of current IT and STEM subjects that are there. I think maybe part of the issue is that actually that doesn't align with the aspirations of what people want, be that male, female, at all. And I think there's maybe some way to go in terms of just educating the breadth of what these STEM subjects are, what these STEM careers are, for people to realise what it is they could be doing and how important these roles are. I mean, a lot of the roles in technology are very behind the scenes in their nature, so don't fit with this whole rock star persona, you know, out there doing amazing things, making massive changes to everybody's life, and yet they're not going to appear on the news, they're not going to be on YouTube, and people aren't going to know about them. So I think there's maybe some mileage there in changing people's understanding, I suppose, of what these STEM subjects can do for people.
John, is this something you're working on at your school?
It's a tricky one, and it's one that myself and our science department, we are sort of working on, and we're trying to sort of build it up. But, you know, it's something that we suffer the same as all other schools. Maybe in some ways, being an all-girls school, our percentages are slightly higher in terms of uptake and keep up with physics and subjects like that are historically low for girls' numbers, but we still have that sort of struggle, and it's often a subject that they'll go through their GCSEs and you'll see a drop off at A level as well. So it's there. I think in some ways in a girls' school, there's perhaps more breadth for the girls who have the interest to sort of carry it on, and they feel sort of less inclined to drop it and drop back where there's maybe, you know, a higher percentage of boys doing the subject. So those who are interested, I think, in an all-girls school get that chance to really sort of flourish with it, but it's still a struggle.
I suppose one source is the school alumni, the old girls coming back in who've got careers in the tech industry, coming back and talking about what they do and sharing some of their experience in school.
Yeah, absolutely, and we do run a lot of sort of after-school programs where people come in and talk about things, and this is one of the things we're working with the science teachers as well to try and get a kind of program of female women in STEM in the local area and things like this to come in and talk to the girls and let them know, you know, just what they could get involved with and what those kind of subjects and those careers could lead to.
Okay, thank you. Carrie Anne, you talked earlier about the leaky bucket, I think, as well as the leaky pipeline. Is it a hard life for women working in tech?
So, I mean, if you read anything in the media, it sounds like, you know, that it's the worst job in the world right now. It sounds like
year 6, perhaps.
yeah. So they're leaving in their droves. There's a gender pay gap. You know, there's lots of discrimination and so on. I'm not sure that's truly reflective of what's happening. I meet a lot of women at, you know, Python conferences and so on, and actually they're really enjoying what they're doing because they love their job and they love being a part of that. So I'm not sure that's really fair, but the statistics do demonstrate that women are leaving right now. So there's something that industry needs to do to kind of encourage them to stay, and businesses are spending a lot of time thinking about what they're doing. Google quite famously published, you know, their demographics and what they're trying to do to ensure that, you know, Google Women keeps going. So yeah, it's a problem there as well, and I think it's a good thing to recognise that the solutions for that particular group are probably quite different to the approaches and solutions for schools.
Ah, okay. So things that work in the industry won't necessarily transfer into. Right. Okay.
So I think an example of that would be like female-only groups. So in industry, actually, they're really supportive. That female network meeting up, something like Pi Ladies or Django Girls or whatever it is, you know, sharing skills and kind of what you're dealing with at work at the moment, and having that networking opportunity in that kind of safe space is really important. Whereas in schools, actually, something like that could, in a you know, co-ed school, could lead to some resentment from the boys, which can be a problem. And also, we're kind of saying to the girls at a very young age, oh, this subject isn't quite for you unless you're in your special group on your own. Then you can access this subject. And I think you can see that in all girls' schools have done a fabulous job in, you know, getting girls into science subjects. There's lots of data that shows that all girls' schools do very well in this space. But I don't think that means then that in a co-ed school you should try and emulate a single-sex school, because I don't think that works. It has different dynamics and different things going on. I think we should encourage inclusivity and gender neutral much more than, you know, segregating children at an early age.
So from my teaching days, I have memory of Code Club for Girls. No, it was Computer Club for Girls, wasn't it? Which, despite the fact I was working in an all-girls school at the time, seemed absolutely anathema to me. And the sorts of activities which they seemed to be suggesting as appropriate didn't seem to be the sort of thing I would want my pupils of either gender, in fact, engaging in. You may not wish to comment.
Yeah, the eyeshadow changer in spreadsheet, or the colour selector for your skin type, was the one that killed that club for me forever.
Right. Simon, I think you typed a question there. Is your microphone working, or shall I? Okay. Hello, Simon. Simon, did you have a question about in engagement in industry as affecting interest at school level? I can't hear you, Simon. This is conveyed through the medium of mime, looks of it. Okay, I think Simon typed a question in there about at school level, do girls have a perception of how difficult things could be up in the world of work, and that might put them off computing at GCSE or A level? I'm paraphrasing, Simon. Is that roughly what you were getting at? Good, a thumbs up. That's good enough. Okay, what do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think if it's so prominent in the media everywhere saying, oh, there's always women leaving industry, then of course girls are going to say, well, I'm not sure about this subject. I'm not sure if I want to go into this. I'm not sure if the jobs in this sector are for me, of course.
And the Hour of Code video that we get each year that comes out, that's quite good, with lots of a good spread of male and female talking heads on there. But it just seems to me that technology doesn't attract girls. I don't know if you've read Little Miss Geek by was it Belinda Palmer, and the Pink It, Shrink It and Bling It, and the girls love their phone, and something like, what is it, 60% of phones are bought by female consumers, but they have no influence on the design, the apps. They're not in there making it. They're simply victims of it, and I don't know how you convince them otherwise that they can do this. It's just utterly joyful to see when they do succeed at it, but we just don't seem to be able to carry that wave on when they do succeed at doing something and thinking, yes, this is brilliant, I could do it. And then, of course, we're victims of the pink aisle, aren't we, in Toys R Us and things like that. So, I don't know. I think we're fighting society, maybe.
Can I say something there? I'm happy for girls to be pink, more than happy. And if they want to make pink tech is fine. But as long as they're going, I want to make pink tech. So it's, for me, whether they're pink or whatever colour, it's just that they're not passive. So I just posted something about a bit freaky thing. I don't know if you saw it on the thing, which is an Ariana Grande thing.
I'm not sure where these things that are going. They appear on my screen briefly, and then there's a whole conversation happening over here. Oh wow!
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right, so I'm going to share my screen with you about something. Right, about something that is. I'm going to share my screen. Let's have a go. So my share. Can you see that? Can everyone see that? Can you see this? Yeah?
Yep.
So my daughter is 17 and she hates the word geek. She doesn't want to be a geek. She's not interested in being a geek. She doesn't like games. She doesn't like gaming. She doesn't like Minecraft. She wants to make beautiful things. She wants to make cool things. But that seems like that's not really what a computer scientist is. She likes design. And it's like, oh my God, she wants to make web pages. That's that's not being a real computer scientist. But she likes
the computer against school folk. Yeah, you say that.
But you know what I mean, though.
Yeah.
So then here's Ariana Grande, who is the bee's knees, in terms of young women's aspirations in terms of a pop star. And she worked with this incredibly cool woman. I can't remember what her name is. Who's in London, I think. Who's designed these? Oh, she's worked on the team that have designed these freaky gloves that change people's voices and all these kind of things. Now, I agree. This isn't somebody who's in there, who's not a digital leader, but it's somebody who's really aspirational. They love Ariana Grande, but it's like here she is doing really cool tech things, and yes, she's being quite passive in that she's using it, but there are videos of her kind of trying it all out and I don't know. Is this an opportunity, or are we or is this just falling into a trap? But anyway, an idea.
I mean, it's brilliant that she's demonstrating these things and she's showing what girls can do. Perhaps if you want to encourage girls to actually be more involved, you need to see her doing making, coding, actually being more involved than just trying something on. The role model I like to put in front of girls, I mean, apart from Carrie Anne, of course, is Limor Fried, Lady Ada. I mean, why wouldn't you? She's just so cool, and the things that she does. And I did briefly have a girls-only computer club, which I ran exclusively for 2 girls. And we used to regularly watch the Wednesday wearables videos that came from Adafruit because A, they were just brilliant to watch, and B, occasionally we made some of the things. So yeah, cool people, but I think we need to see these cool people actually doing the making rather than being also, well, not just being the designer of it. I think we need to encourage the girls that you can design it, but you can make it too, and be really involved.
But even if they don't have to be, you know what I mean, is they don't have to be all the way. I just feel like we just need to like make a little tiny step and go, oh look, someone cool is doing something with tech, and they're kind of being empowered and they're involved in this.
Yeah,
it's
yeah. I mean,
like, there was a program
like, recently, wasn't there, about getting the girls to design a new tech product. I don't know if you saw that, and that was really interesting to see these girls who had ideas and eventually saw it through. So no, they don't have to actually be involved in every step, but I think you have to show girls that they can, and that yeah, their ideas are worthwhile. And I haven't got any problem with pink, but I just, you know, maybe just a little bit of purple now and again rather than...
I mean, the thing about wearable tech comes up from time to time, that, you know, there is somehow this notion that if we're going to do a technology project which is going to be appealing to girls, then it's got to be, wearable tech is something that we can look at for that. Is that a fair and reasonable assumption? Is it not too similar to saying, well, boys do metalwork and woodwork and girls do needlework?
I think it feeds into girls' creativity. I think girls want to be creative, and it doesn't matter. I mean, I've done electrical paint, and made cards and things. Anything creative, I think, suits girls very well.
Carrie Anne, what's your view?
Well, I think John wanted to say something.
Okay, John, what's your view?
It's interesting you should say the creative side and sort of linking with textiles and wearable tech. That's a project we've just started with our Year 7, linking with the textiles department. Bit early on in the project to say how well that's going, but with our Year 9, using the Raspberry Pis doing physical computing, we've seen the girls absolutely take to getting the power tools out and making wildlife cameras and, you know, getting hands-on with it just as much as perhaps what you'd think would be the more creative ones. You know, we gave them the opportunity of a list of projects they could choose from. We had some groups of girls who said, no, the one we want to do is we want to program traffic light sequences. We didn't think anyone was going to take that, but they took it and they run with it. And just watching them sort of, I suppose, move out of what would be the normal considered thing for girls to be doing and actually really sort of taking to it, it's been great. It's been a real eye-opener and it's been lovely to see.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we're definitely seeing this in what we're trying to do here at Raspberry Pi. You know, we take this approach of that digital making is what we're trying to promote, and we're seeing this make space movement kind of happening, not just you know, globally and in a kind of private or home sector, but also in education as well. Lots of schools bringing make spaces into their libraries most often. I've just been reading a book today actually about worlds of making and how you can bring make spaces into your school, and there's a few common themes that come out of why you should do this. One is around collaboration, that actually children want to share what they've made because they're proud of it with someone else, and they also want to learn new skills in a kind of I don't know, in a not so formal setting. They like ownership of a project. They love learning through play and tinkering, and this is something that physical computing and digital making allows you to do. And so I think this is why we look to wearables as being such a great thing to do, because it does just capture children's imagination.
Okay. That seems a persuasive argument. Jane, do you want to say anything about tinkering in the primary phase?
Oh, I love a bit of tinkering, Miles. But yeah, I think it's fantastic, and I completely agree with what everyone said about the whole thing of the making and being social. And I don't think it has to be wearables, like everyone said. It's just about making something that's a little bit useful or purposeful, and it's not just a game. I know it's often to say it's not just a game, but it's got some kind of purpose. And I really do agree with Carrie Anne as well about the whole thing of it being social, about the collaboration. Again, I'm harking back to this website that I looked at. There was for a coding kind of morning, and the girls, it was all girls, but they're all sat by themselves looking at their little screen, and the only person they ever looked at was the male. And it was like, no, put the girls together. Aren't the girls telling you what to do? But so it's difficult because I don't know, is that the way? Is it making a difference? I don't know. That's the other thing. Those schools that are implementing a more maker-based, relevant curriculum, is it increasing the number of girls, or is the whole thing of just the social pressure on girls, is it just so insurmountable? I was at an event today where an IET microbit thing, and there was this little group of girls, and the lady asked, who would like to be an engineer? And one of the girls tentatively started to put her hand up, looked at her friends, went and put her hand back down again. And I kind of went up and I said, but you did so well. And in fact, they won a prize. But it was the thing of that she did, and oh no. And there was a bank of boys. Every boy's hand went, and so like exactly what Carrie Anne you said. It's not just about our subject.
Okay, Billy, any thoughts on this from your perspective?
Not at the moment. No, I'm just enjoying this.
It's fine. Thank you. Can I move us on to?
Can I just ask whether? So you brought up a really interesting point about research, like. Do we know that if any of these approaches are working? And it kind of, perhaps it's too soon to be asking or to have that data in front of us, but it seems like from the Faculty of Education here in Cambridge that I've been talking to, there are PhD students, and on the Google form for this session there was some questions from people who are doing their masters, or they're kind of looking at this. So I think there could be some research emerging in the next few years that would be interesting. So I think right now we don't have that, and I'm super excited to look at it when it does become available.
Also, as a teacher, I do feel that we don't always know now the difference we're making. So often you see famous people advertised and they say, oh, it was Miss Philbin, she got me started, for example. So our difference might come in 5, 10, 15, 20 years' time, when something we have done today somehow turns a light on, flicks a switch, does something that gets someone maybe changing direction in their career and thinking, well, actually, I could do that. So it's not researchable necessarily.
No, and as teachers we know, right, we're making memories. We're not just filling children and preparing them for tests. That's what we do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Talking of preparing children for tests, let's talk a little about GCSE, please, because that came up a number of times in the Google form for this, about what are the specific strategies to persuade more girls to study computing for GCSE and to empower them to do particularly well when it comes to that qualification.
And everyone goes quiet.
I'm going to say, and this is actually nothing to do with me as a teacher, it's me as a parent. My daughter wanted to do computer science, but it was so hard for her to do it because her school had kind of put the subjects that were all in all the wrong places. So if you wanted to do any kind of, it's so sexist what I'm going to say, so, but anyway, so kind of the girls subjects, then you couldn't do the girls subjects and computer science. It just was impossible. It was like, and she had to get special dispensation and all this kind of thing to kind of combine. So it was almost as though there was something in the curriculum, but I suppose it's cause and effect, isn't it? That as a school management in secondary, you put things in silos that are going to get selected. So I don't know, but I know that it was very hard for her.
Interesting.
And I mean, I've listened to Dan Gardner talk. I mean, he's a great CAS master teacher, and he really has invested time in trying to get more girls into his subject. And one of the things I thought was really great that he did was he reached out to the maths department. So he went into maths and he spoke to, the maths department identified girls that were particularly good at maths. And he went and kind of spoke to them and encouraged them to perhaps drop into some computing lessons to see what it was about. He ran some extracurricular things for them and tried to bring them in that way or through physics. And I thought that was a pretty good approach.
Well, we don't have any good answers.
Okay. I suppose part of it is about good teaching. And that it's not necessarily specifically aiming to promote GCSE computing to girls, but aiming to promote GCSE computing to all of your pupils, girls included. It comes back to that message about inclusive rather than gender specific, yes?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, as well as the children themselves, parents play a really big part in children's choices for GCSE. I mean, I've lost count of times at parents' evening a parent says to me, oh, my child you're definitely taking ICT, aren't you? And they kind of go, oh, I don't know, it's on at the same time as PE. I was hoping to take that subject. And they go, well, no, ICT is really important. And yet the parent can't explain why the subject is important to them. And I think it's the same now with computing. They know it's important. The media keeps telling them it's important, but they're not quite sure why it's important. And so sometimes there's a bit of resentment from students, like, oh, I've got to take this subject. So they play a role as well.
Right. I wondered also if there was something around the sorts of projects which are set as GCSE controlled assessment tasks. That down in Key Stage 3 we can do lots of those, programming with a purpose, let's make something, let's link the physical and the virtual together. You get lovely things like CDI apps for good going on. There's plenty of scope for collaborative teamwork projects where we make something that's useful for other people. And then up at A-level, there's plenty of scope there for students to structure their A-level projects however they want to investigate something which is really interesting for them or to make something which they get excited about, although obviously the number of girls studying A-level computing is even low. Whereas, do you think that the GCSE coursework tasks are terribly dull?
They do. They look terribly dull. And there's that individuality of them as well. I think there's something in when you're, choosing your options, you go to your options evening and you walk around the school and you go into DT where there are some beautiful examples of something someone has made. You get quite excited about that. You walk into art and design and all this glorious artwork is up on the wall and this is all part of GCSE coursework. You walk into IT and you're just walking into the classroom with your horseshoe with all the computers that are built into the wall. Where are the controlled assessments where they've made something that then you can display? Even if it's a game, which I hate to refer to, but whatever it is that the students have built in that controlled assessment should be shared. I think that would help.
I was chatting to Pete Camp, who's one of Billy's and my colleagues, about exactly that. And if only the computing courseworks were more like design and technology or art and design courseworks, where there's a brief, there's an idea, there's something suggested, but then go and pursue that in a much more open-ended sort of way. Harder to mark, perhaps.
Yeah, it's hard to get...
For me, it's sorry, go on, John.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's hard to get excited by a database, even if that's something you're doing for your job on a daily basis, and it certainly doesn't kind of spark the imagination when you walk in and look at a whole load of SQL. So, yeah, I think there's a problem there.
Fine. Closing words from anybody, please.
I think we just need to keep on going. We just need to keep on plugging away, and you know, build it, and they will come.
I agree fully. And in this spirit, I would quite like to launch a conference that is going to take place in June. So CAS #include, we'll quite often run something called the Diversity Conference, Diversity in Computer Science Conference. And I'm just going to share quickly a slide with everybody so that they can see it. If you want to come along to that conference, it's on a Saturday on the 11th of June. We're trying to see whether or not we can set up childcare on that day. If we can find some funding for that childcare, then we will definitely do it. But if you want to get your ticket now, we have an early bird offer, so you can get it for just £20. You'll be fed. People like Sue is going to be there. She's going to run a wearables, a hands-on session. We've got Codebug who are going to do a hands-on session. Sarah Zamon's going to do stuff with Minecraft. We're going to have experts in SEN, disabilities, gender, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status to try and really encourage diversity within computer science. So do come along. It's going to be fab.
Carrie Anne, that sounds great. Yeah. Thank you ever so much.
Carrie Anne, I've booked on already.
Yes, I've got the one. I've got a punter.
I'm already paid. I thought, oh, it's cheap. I'll book it. We've got a Raspberry Pi Jam thing with autism and Tourette's coming up in a couple of weeks as well. So if anyone's in London, that's in a couple of weeks with Grace has organised that, so we're supporting that. I think I completely agree. So we've just got to keep going, haven't we? And it would be great as well to ask girls, the tiny 300 girls, what is it that makes it just you? So if anyone can do some research on the 300.
So who are these 300 girls? Have I missed something?
Well, however many it is that are doing A-level, it was 323.
Oh, last year, 427 or something.
Right.
427. What's it this year? So do we know how many it is this year?
Not yet.
It's probably gone down.
As there's only 427, can they not be interviewed? Can someone not go and talk to them and talk to them?
Billy, what's your workload for next year like?
Did more girls took Welsh last year? Welsh, great language.
If memory serves, very, very few boys study Welsh at A-level, and I think that might be a topic for another chat tonight rather than this. Good. I think that takes us pretty much to the dot of 9. So unless there is anything else, I'm going to stop the broadcast now and say thank you all very, very much for joining us this evening, and to those who've been watching on the live stream. Thank you ever so much. Right. Do subscribe to CAS TV, and of course, Female Diaries.
Bye.